Hi everyone, this is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. It is Tuesday, February 18th, and today I'm making a video to talk about Mars's trine to Uranus, which is happening this week. I'll be making a couple other videos this week you can stay tuned for. I'm going to be making a video on Jupiter's sextile to Neptune, probably tomorrow. And later this week, once we've all gotten nice and inundated by this Mercury retrograde, I'll also be making a video on Mercury's retrograde in Pisces. We'll check in and see how that's going. Lots to talk about this week. Let's go ahead and take a look at the real-time clock right now and get a feeling for how this aspect between Mars and Uranus is perfecting. Now, first of all, you can note that this is a trine that's unfolding between Mars and Uranus, and we know that trines are of the nature of Jupiter and hence more productive. I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of this transit, but we are still dealing with the malefic Mars, and we are still dealing with a planet that can be very erratic and sometimes destructive in Uranus. So we also have to issue a few little warnings, but generally speaking, I think this transit is going to be very positive. So here's what you can expect. First of all, you've got the god of will, of action, of courage, of war and battle, of inception, of starting things in a very productive sign. It's exalted Mars in the sign of Capricorn. So first of all, we've got Mars with wind at its back right now. And that's good news. We can do a lot when Mars is in that productive, more contained, defined, mature, less rash sign of Capricorn. On the other hand, Mars can be a little ruthless in this sign, and sometimes where there's a will, there's a way becomes Machiavellian. So you do have to watch for kind of the cold, ruthless, determined, kick ass and take names Mars. Not always a bad thing, but can be. So, always that potential for Mars to slide into being overly aggressive, overly willful. And with Capricorn, it can be a little cold and ruthless. So careful of that. Now, otherwise, Uranus in Taurus, which has been there for a while, recently turned direct and is starting to pick up steam again, moving forward in Taurus after being stationing direct after retrograde last month in January. Actually turned direct right as Saturn and Pluto were conjoining with one another in the middle of eclipse season. So Uranus gaining some forward momentum, Mars moving through a trine to Uranus. It perfects between like Thursday and Saturday. Friday is the exact day, I believe, but Thursday to Saturday is when you'll feel this. Now, the nice thing about a trine is, again, that it's going to be productive and harmonious and growth-oriented. Well, Uranus is a planet that has to do with defying limitations, defying conventions, defying authority. It's an innovator. It's a rebel. It is a defiant planet. But also, it is a planet that is very disruptive and can be chaotic. So, when we are trying to fly outside the limits, sometimes we crash. When we are trying to defy conventions and norms, sometimes we offend people and create chaos. The French Revolution, the American Revolution were bloody revolutions, even though many people cite them as some of the more important, movements in world government and, in the history of the world. Still, they were bloody. And also, oftentimes the revolutionary becomes the new tyrant. So we always have to be careful when you get Mars and Uranus together. Typically speaking, if they're not in a harmonious aspect like a sextile or a trine, you can get things like accidents, sudden violent events or explosiveness, a tendency to be willful and defiant to a fault such that one is reckless, ruthless, or harmful to others. And Mars opposite Uranus can also be the sense of just being an individualist and a fighter to a fault. So that's just a little taste of Mars Uranus when they're not harmoniously aligned. They are, so this should be pretty good. In Earth signs, the one thing you can think about is just a lot of energy to utilize one's individual will in ways that are productive, that get a lot of results. So that would be like positive number one. Positive number two, though, is that if you want to do something that's original, unique, different, if you want to break the mold and you need that sense of discipline and strength and action to get started on it, this is really a good time to do something like that. On the other hand, maybe a third thing that we could say is that if there is any way in which we need to get motivated to do something that represents a kind of constricted or maybe a limit that we've placed on ourselves, this is a transit that can, kind of get you out of bed, sort of blow the trumpet and be like, I'm doing it. I'm going to do that thing that I've been neglecting. I'm going to get back to the gym, or I'm going to, take on that project that it's been sitting there forever. And it's like, it's time to move that energy. You know what I mean? So that could be really positive as a way of just breaking through self limitations. So sometimes the limitations we're breaking through are sort of external to us. Sometimes we have to confront an authority, or we have to, just go and face something head on or whatever. We're going to come up with a new way of doing something. Other times it's like, it's time to overcome some kind of self-limiting idea or belief about ourselves or about something, and get that motivation up and just blast through. Now, again, some warnings. My wife and I were driving home the other night after Valentine's date that we went on, and there were obviously probably young people, I would imagine, that were like drag racing down the freeway. They must have zipped by us going like 100 miles an hour. And my immediate thought was like, they're, first of all, they're poor mothers. And my wife said, she actually said it out loud. She was like, oh my God, they're poor mothers. And those stupid kids, like, what are they doing? We just assumed they were kids, no idea who they were. But anyway, I was just like, that's what it felt like to us. And, the thing is that there's an impulse that exists within any of us to break limits and barriers. But when that energy, when that takes over, sometimes we feel like we're invincible. And the feeling that both of us had when we saw these kids, zip by so fast going down the freeway was like, that's not fun, and you're going to get hurt. You know what I mean? Like, that's a risk you shouldn't be taking. And yet when Mars-Uranus, just to kind of place Mars-Uranus on the drag racers for a second, right? When Mars-Uranus takes over, it's as though we feel like, I will never die. I'm invincible. I can break all limits. I can break all barriers. Mars to Uranus, for example, is like Jupiter and Uranus too. Both are associated with breaking barriers and limitations and world records and things like athletics, or breaking the speed of sound in a jet, or whatever, breaking through previously held limitations in nature, running the fastest marathon or the fastest mile that's ever been run. There is a sense of exerting oneself and just breaking through something. But we also have to remember that in mythology and in, human nature, it's like, yeah, and sometimes you die doing that, right? Sometimes people who are pioneers, who are explorers, who are extreme athletes, stuff like that, sometimes you go to an extreme too far. Now, somewhere between, the paranoid parent in me, right, that was like, oh my God, those kids shouldn't be doing that. And I do think it was just stupid to be going that fast on a freeway where other people are driving, putting other people's lives in risk, and so forth. But somewhere between that part of me and the part of me that says, sometimes you just have to press that gas pedal, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and just break through a self-limiting idea, break on through to the other side, so to speak. But somewhere in between, the part of me that has a drag racing, young, like, I think I've mentioned Maverick and Top Gun before, like, if there's that exists in me. But somewhere between that and the parent that's like, you stupid idiot, don't you drive that fast, is the person that is sane enough to know how to manage the Mars-Uranus energy. And that's typically how it is for all of us. It's somewhere between way too afraid and way too ballsy that we find the best, most capable way of steering the car through the energy of a Mars-Uranus dynamic. So just remember that this week, because in my mind, that's just some simple analogies that can help you figure out how to navigate with this energy rather than being driven by it, which will have the potential to be like 120 miles an hour. So now you could watch for it in the news as well. It would not be at all surprising to see people breaking limits and barriers, to see people doing things that are very avant-garde and rebellious, but gaining some kind of momentum or success for doing so. For people to be defiant and original, and to surpass some kind of previous norm, or like, again, shattering the record books in some way. So these kinds of events, watch for them in the news, but also watch for, this is Mars and Uranus after all, so potential is there for someone to go too far and crash. And that dynamic, that the tension between Mars and Uranus is not completely eliminated just by virtue of them being in a trine. So we do have to keep an eye on that. All right, that's what I've got for you guys. I hope this was interesting. Like I said, I'll be back with a little bit more on Jupiter and Neptune. That's another big transit perfecting this week. Beautiful transit. I think it's pretty positive. We'll be talking about that soon. Mercury in its fall, retrograde, etc. Coming back to that, seeing how that's going for you guys. I'd love to hear how you are already feeling or experiencing the Mars-Uranus energy. If you are, what kind of breakthroughs, what kind of energy are you feeling? What kind of stories or events are happening around you? In the comments section, feel free to share, and I will see you guys again soon. Take care. Bye.